again, glad that you're back with us as we begin session 4. And I'm here today with Reverend Thomas Harper and with Dr. Jaime Clark-Soles from Perkins School of Theology. And we are looking together at chapter 15. And we're starting with verse 12, where Jesus says, I have called you friends. Mm-hmm. It's such a neat image to think, wow, I'm one of Jesus' friends. Well, what does he mean by that? Is that just what we think of as regular friendship? Is like he's my pal?
Yeah, right. Yeah, so it is one of the unique things about the Gospel of John is the repetition and insistence on Jesus's part that we're Jesus' friends. He's not just our teacher. He is our teacher, but not just that, or Lord. He switches over also to us being friends. And the first thing I would say is to remind us that chapter 15, we're still in the farewell discourse. So we're still in the context where he has pulled his close friends aside and is encouraging them and preparing them and equipping them to do community together, on the one hand, and also function out in the larger world. And so developing friendships inside the community is going to be crucial. So again, all of these people are Jewish, and so friendship is going to be in the context of covenant. I mean, so friendship, in some way, shape, or form, is a covenant relationship, right? And I think in our society, we can go with that. Like, you and I are friends. You and I are friends. I think something that's not natural or innate to us in our culture is the notion that God makes a covenant with people. Right? God chooses a people, not just individuals. And so to be in covenant with the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, we have to be in covenant with one another. So it kind of pushes against the individualistic notion of friendship, that friendship is a covenant relationship in community. So I think that's distinctive. So it's not just, yay, Jesus is my buddy, but somehow, yeah, exactly. Somehow, in order to develop my friendship with Jesus means I have to develop my friendship with all. There's a reason he didn't just speak to them only individually. I mean, we're going to see this actually in a really moving place in chapter 21 when he's on the beach and working with Peter to restore Peter and reconcile that friendship. It's very interesting. A lot of people picture that, I think, as just happening between Jesus and Peter. But there's no reason not to imagine that that's not an extension of this, that Jesus is actually having that encounter with Peter in the midst of the whole group. Yeah, and I think that's different from what we
it's such an important distinction, because even in our language, we talk about Jesus as your own personal Lord and Savior.
We do say
totally
that.
Individualize it.
Yeah, that's well said. Yeah.
So I think you mentioned, you and I can be friends and you and I can be friends, but it sounds like when we're talking about Christian friendship, true Christian friendship, that's not as easy. What would you say are some of the obstacles to the type of friendship in the Christian community?
So sometimes I hear people, especially I think if they're sometimes newer to church, the first time they see conflict in church can be a little disillusioning or something like that.
Even if you're not new to church.
Even if you're not new to church.
It can be disillusioning.
So it can be disillusioning, but the thing is, church is just made up of people. And so that's not realistic, And so I think first looking to see how we do friendship in church. I think, isn't that one of the 5?
So yeah, we have 5 inside-out habits here at St. Luke's.
Okay.
We pray and worship.
Okay.
Second, we study the Bible. Okay. Third, we make friends.
Okay.
Fourth, we tell our stories. And then fifth, we give ourselves away in service and generosity.
Okay, so out of, all the things you could have picked, you picked this as one of the top 5. So what I've seen, I've seen a number of things. I've been in church, for a while. So I think one of the things I see is competition. Even within church, we get into a kind of competitive model of things. And you see it. So these are the disciples, right? They're here. They get time alone with Jesus to get personal instruction. And what do? If you were to flip over to chapter 20, when they go to the tomb, you see this kind of competition between Peter and the beloved disciple, racing to see who's going to get there first, right? And then even in 21, after they've had these resurrection appearances of Jesus, he's fed them breakfast on the beach. And at the very end of if you look at 21, at the end of it, Peter, the beloved disciple, is there. So 21:20. Peter turned and saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following them. He was the one who had reclined upon Jesus' kolpos at the supper and had said, Lord, who is it that's going to betray you? When Peter saw him, he said to Jesus, Lord, what about him? You know, really, the end of the gospel. And Jesus said to him, look, if it's my will, your main cycle, what is it to you?
Yeah, I love
Follow
that.
me.
What is that to you? What's
Right?
your problem, buddy?
It's almost comical in its humanity.
Yeah.
It really
Yeah.
just connects us so to just that same impetus of
They're
competition.
disciples and they're doing this competition thing. I mean, you think of it in we don't have these two stories in John, but in the synoptics where it's like, who's going to sit on your right? Can I sit on your right? Can I sit on your left? And it's just this, this competition. And what should we expect if, they are that human? So I think, that's one of the things I see. So the kind of temptation to competition, I think the temptation to operate out of a theology of scarcity instead of a theology of abundance, which I think we take in from our society. There's only so much to go around. So the more you have, that automatically means the less I can have. And this gospel from chapter 1 to 21 pushes against that and says with God, it's very Psalm 23, it overflows. We're talking about with God, it's all overflowing. There's just so much extra. There's living water, living bread. There's plenty for everybody. So I think the scriptures can train us to trust that God is a God of abundance, and we can relax into that. So I think there's just kind of a number of
Fighting for resources,
Yeah.
competition and jealousy. What about
Yeah.
just we seem to be in a place where a time when people are really afraid.
Agreed. And so one of the things I think is really interesting, not just about John's community, but the whole first century church, is what they were trying to do. They were trying to do, and they didn't try, they did do it. They created a new way of being community. So they reached across a lot of different kinds of natural barriers or borders, whether it's gender, culture, ethnicity, you name it. They came together and had to kind of do community with people really unlike them. So if you think of John's community, for instance, it's at least bilingual, trilingual. It's extremely multicultural. For sure you have Samaritans in there, John the Baptist followers, you have Gentiles, that's clear. You see that in chapter 12 when these Greeks come. Jesus' hour arrives when these Greeks come. Obviously all of the original people are Jewish, so you truly, in this one community, have all these cultures going on. And, sometimes, we're afraid of that which is other or that which is different. And so now you're asking me to kind of develop deep, intimate, vulnerable relationships with somebody who's really other. Because that is what kind of, I assume you're asking. When you ask people to be friends, you're not saying
Right.
be friends only with the people exactly like you.
So would the community, what you hear of the community of the beloved disciple, the community of John,
Yep.
would it be multicultural? Would they be all Jews?
Yeah, no, that's the thing. So the Gospel of John, we tend to place it so if you figure the temple is destroyed in 70 CE, right? And so the Gospel of John we consider to be the latest gospel written. So somewhere around the end of the first century, we assume it's composed in layers, stages of composition, but the whole thing is brought to completion by the end of the first century. So it's the latest gospel, and it's written again after the destruction of the temple. And so, what you have here is this community, like this new kind of thing. It's post-temple. So you've got Jews in it for sure, but now you have people, the temple no longer stands. So where is the center? For this group, the center is believing in Jesus, but there's a lot of diversity. So you have a mix of Jews. John the Baptist followers, you see from chapter 1, John the Baptist kind of handing his disciples off to Jesus, basically legitimating that. You see the story of Samaritans, like the Samaritan woman in here. So we assume there were Samaritans in that mix. So they were trying to hold together, and they did it. I mean, again, not without conflict, a whole mess of different kinds of people coming from different places, speaking different languages, having different backgrounds, because obviously Jews would already know Scripture, the Greeks may or may not,
right.
etc. So the context they're in is, it reminds me of Paul, like in 1 Corinthians 11, the Lord's Supper. They're having issues because, again, they have all kinds of people. They're coming from the world, which has its certain kind of categories and hierarchies and value judgments about who's more important than whom, and they're being brought together in a community, and the hierarchy is being eliminated, and, this kind of I'm better than you or whatever, and it's all, no, we're all brothers and sisters. It's a level playing field, and it's a really strange new social experiment in the first century church. So of course you're going to expect conflict within, and also people outside looking at this thing are going to have some opinions that are probably going to make it challenging when you walk out the door.
All that talk about,
Right?
like verse 18, if the world hates you, be aware it hated me before it hated you. If you
Yeah.
belong to the world would love you, but you don't. So those are...
Yeah, he goes on. Remember,
Persecutions.
Yeah, exactly. Servants aren't greater than their masters. So when they go out and people are saying, "Wow, what is this community you're a part of?" And St. Luke's, right, is about creating a community of people who live in the world and love the world the way God loves it. And if we're looking through these texts for concrete examples, and your church, you could list many things, concrete examples of things you do. I mean, according to certain kinds of logic, a lot of stuff you're doing is stupid, so what kind of sense does it make to get down on the floor and wash the feet of someone you know full well, not only is not going to just return in kind the favor, you might say, okay, there's a certain kind of logic to that, but most certainly someone you know isn't going to give back to you, and instead actually might go do things that make your life more difficult. In his case, betray him, deny him. So this way of living in the world, just this kind of abundant love, prodigal almost, extravagant grace and love. It's strange, and people are like, what are you about? Why are you making a community like this where there's like no hierarchy, or you do stuff for people who don't deserve it? I hope you know they don't deserve that, and I hope you know they're not even going to appreciate it. It's a waste. You're pouring your money into a black hole. I mean, it's not a good investment. You're not going to get a good return on your investment for what you're doing. Does that make sense? So to go out and try to explain, and let alone if you start getting into more touchy territory where you're embracing something in your church or groups of people or whatever that other people have something against. I don't know. People are just, what is going on over there? There's a lady wiping someone's feet with her hair. It's strange behavior. And so you can expect people to protest or at least tempt you away from what you're doing and say, does it make sense? Should you really be doing this? Is this a good use of your money, your time? So he tells them, expect it. Don't be like, oh my gosh, I thought this was all just supposed to go along swimmingly. He's like, no.
Jesus seemed to be so worried that they would just give up on it and go back to being like everybody else. And so he prayed, don't take them out of the world.
Yeah.
They're in the world, but don't let them be overcome by the world either. Don't let them be taken.
Which I love. Yeah, go ahead.
I'll just say, so we have this radical statement of Jesus saying to God's people, you are my friends. I'm not calling you servants anymore. I'm raising you to this intimate level of friendship.
Right.
And yet we have such a difficulty with this understanding of non-hierarchical friendship. We are jealous of each other. We have competitions that we can read in the book and laugh, but realize how true it is for us today. So what are some practical solutions for that? How can we be the
that's a great question. How do we develop friendships of trust? Because I don't think we get a lot of practice sometimes in the world trusting. Like, trusting isn't an obvious thing to do. So how do we make this a place where we practice that? So some of we do certain rituals. I think every time we do communion, come together around certain rituals. I've seen rituals of healing, when we have healing services, services of forgiveness where people can receive forgiveness, offer it. So I think one way we do it is rituals. I think we do it through structured relationships. I mean, I think even this Bible study, you keep inviting people to do it with somebody else. You're building a friendship that is deep, and that has a telos. It has a goal to it of of deepening, becoming a more gracious kind of person. So I mean, I know St. Luke's does a number of things around kind of structured relationships. There's accountability partners
Right.
or mentors, and
Right, and Tom, you know this. So one of the things I'm really passionate about is our small groups here at St. Luke's. It's just a great way for people to take a study like this and to do life together. I mean, like, not just dive in, but know what's going on with the person next to you, praying for that person, holding each other accountable, taking the other into a space that's intimate
and holding each
whole.
other accountable in a way that is driven by love
Right.
and not judgment. Yeah, but really, like, it's a safe place. So truly, tell me who you are. Show your full self, and be able to be authentic, which I think we're hard pressed to come by. A lot of us,
No,
friendships
but
of
it's
deep trust.
it's the secret sauce of authentic community is that ability to know that that I'll be loved, and I may be held accountable, and it may not always be pleasant, but I will be loved enough that people will do the hard things to draw me back in.
And you do the same for them.
Right.
You're there when they, when they're going through tough times, and you're there to ask them, who do you want to be? Who is it that we want to be, and how do we get from where we are to that place, and how do we do it together?
Yeah, it's Jesus. I sometimes think we miss the connection between where Jesus says, "I have called you friends," and then he says, "As I have loved you, now you love one another." We're to love one another the same as friends. We're to make friends with one another, and that's really the core of it. So, well,
Yeah,
thank you so
agreed.
much for this session, and I hope you guys talk a lot about what makes real friendship and real community. Thank you.